Hey, you guys, Erin here. I am back with another moon update for you. What I'm going to be talking about today is what I'm describing as an exceptionally spiritual full moon. This is a full super moon slash lunar eclipse. We've got coming up here on Tuesday, September 17th. The full moon peaks at 7:34 p.m. Pacific time. So for some of you, this is actually taking place on Wednesday, September 18th. You might want to see what time this really comes through for you in your own time zone. But I'm using those terms exceptionally spiritual because this takes place in the sign of Pisces, 25 degrees Pisces. And Pisces is really considered like the mystic of the zodiac. But this is kind of like a heavy dose of this Piscean energy, because what's happening here is with this full super moon, the moon's right here. Neptune is very, very close to the moon. In fact, about 4.5 hours after this full moon, the moon is going to transit over Neptune. And Neptune is really what makes Pisces the mystic of the zodiac. Neptune is one of Pisces' rulers. Neptune influences things like, basically what Neptune does is puts holes in our psychic boundaries called psychic porousness, and makes us all kind of a little more susceptible to picking up each other's energies, and can just overall be a very spiritual energy. Okay, so not only that, but then we take into consideration that this is a North Node lunar eclipse. The North Node is what pumps energy into Earth, okay? So what I'm going to do in this recording is I'm going to actually break down the sign of Pisces for you in detail, because this is like the peak of a growth, the very strong peak of a growth cycle that began about 6 months ago in March, when we had the new moon in the sign of Pisces. Over these 6 months, we've all been experiencing this opportunity for growth that's related to this sign of Pisces. And this is to honor that growth. Not only that, but this is also a time, as soon as that moon begins to wane, so if it peaks at 7:34 p.m. Pacific time, by 7:35, the moon's starting to get smaller. If we set the intentions, we can stay in the natural flow of things and let go of any of this Pisces energy that may not be serving us, okay? So I will break down this sign of Pisces for you in detail. Of course, I'm going to pull up the chart and show you all the other astrological forces we are receiving at the time of this full moon, full super moon. And I will also be talking about certain parts of the body that the sign of Pisces rules, because these parts of our body become more sensitive anytime anything up in the sky is transiting through the sign of Pisces. Okay, but this full moon, we've got, of course, the moon, but we've also got Saturn and Neptune all beaming through the sign of Pisces. So it's a really good idea to pay a little extra attention to these parts of our body. So of course, I'll be mentioning some remedies to help support these parts of our body during this kind of transit. And I will also be mentioning some gemstones that resonate well with the sign of Pisces. You can always find a full extensive list of gemstones that resonate well with the sign the moon is transiting through below here on YouTube. Just look in the description below. What I do is I pull out my journal, I write down the growth that I'm grateful for that's related to that zodiac sign. I write down what I want to let go of, and then I put the gemstones on top of my journal. So it's like the words that I've just spelled out, the spells that I'm casting are now making kind of like a stronger connection with those astrological forces. Now, please do not feel like you're missing out on something if you don't have any of these gemstones. Okay, we take these things in baby steps. If you want to manifest more gemstones into your life, a new moon is always a good time to do that. Write that down in your journal. Okay, now also, if you're somewhat familiar with your natal chart, or if you've had a reading with me, you can go back and review your video recording to see which area of your life this is specifically manifesting for you. Is this coming through your house of communication, your house of career, your house of relationships, Pisces rising, your house of self? If you're using, say, Placidus or equal sign, then you're going to want to see exactly where 25 degrees 41 minutes comes through our natal chart. Personally, I like working with the whole sign house system when it comes to these lunar transits. Okay, so there's that. So this sign of Pisces, this is what we call the mutable water sign. When I say mutable, I'm talking about adaptability. Okay, this is a sign that can kind of be able to change their mind fairly easily if they, are informed of new information. Oh, then that's different than what I thought it was. And they can tend to hang out with all different types of people. The sign of Pisces it seems to be like the least judgmental out of all the zodiac signs. That does not mean that everybody who's a Pisces is not going to be judgmental, because there's so much more to somebody's natal chart, but the sign of Pisces in and of itself, it's really like the sign of oneness in the element of water. See, in astrology, water, in Western astrology, water is very strongly associated with emotions and feelings, okay? So this sign of Pisces is very much associated with having these sensitivities, being emotional, being sensitive. And it's, again, being able to adapt through the emotions, okay? The sign of Pisces is actually represented by two fish that are tied together and swimming in opposite directions. Now, really, that represents, it's like the shifting through the emotional currents of life, okay? You might notice that a lot of Pisces can be, especially moon in Pisces or Pisces rising, can be very, very sensitive and emotional, but they can also shift through. As long as you give them that time to go in the room and cry their eyeballs out, then they can shift through those emotional currents. I've also heard that I've got a book that describes the two fish tied together as one fish is in the physical realm, the other fish is in the spiritual realm, wanting to swim off into, you know, the land of ethereal. But the other fish is holding it onto the physical realm, saying, whoa, 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 you can't just swim away yet. We've got this physical experience to complete. Okay. And in fact, the sign of Pisces can have a very strong tendency to kind of drift off, to kind of, again, this doesn't mean every single Pisces is going to be like this, but you will notice a lot of Pisces will have this tendency to almost require daydream time. Okay, the sign of Pisces, again, being ruled by Neptune, and it's also ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is like the traditional ruler for the sign of Pisces, but then modern astrology really takes Neptune as its ruler. And in my opinion, it can clearly see why it's ruled by both. Not only, I mean, in the mechanics of the zodiac, but also just the influence. So Jupiter is what influences things like faith. It's a very charitable energy that we receive from Jupiter. And then Neptune influences, again, Neptune is what breaks down our psychic boundaries. If you look up Neptune in the Encyclopedia of Medical Astrology, you're going to find all kinds of words like psychic capabilities and intuition. Because that's what Neptune's job is, connects us with the spiritual realm. Okay. And in fact, the sign of Pisces, the motto is I believe. Okay. It's a very, very spiritual energy. And when I say the sign of oneness, I'm talking about like open-mindedness and also kind of like the sign that just sort of wants peace. And one of my favorite books by Judith Hill, she's got a quote for all of the, for each one of the zodiac signs. And the one for Pisces, I think it was love, love, love is what makes the world go round. So this sign of Pisces tends to be a more peaceful sign, but also very, very sensitive. So how have you grown in these ways? And not only that, but with Saturn going through the sign of Pisces till February of 2026, basically, I think, and Saturn will pop into the sign of Aries briefly, but then will retrograde back into Pisces. So basically until February of 2026, Saturn influences discipline and responsibilities. And I have noticed an immense amount of people, I mean, of course I have to take into consideration what I do for a living, but I've noticed so many people, not even, I'm talking about beyond my clientele, I'm talking about friends, all sorts of things where people are taking their spiritual practices to a whole nother level. It's like they're being so disciplined and so responsible with their spiritual journey. And I think that really has a lot to do with Saturn going through the sign of Pisces. Okay, so how have you grown in these ways? How's your spiritual journey? And not only that, I was going to say check in with your intuition, but this is really a time, and especially the hours surrounding this full moon. It's like I'd say about starting around the morning of September 17th for Pacific time, all throughout the day of September 17th, and then going all the way into about the afternoon of September 18th, you might notice yourself being exceptionally intuitive. Okay. You might want to pay attention to that, especially if you've got some strong Pisces placements in your chart, or really any of the water signs, or even any of the earth signs, really any of the signs. People might be noticing their intuition is heightened. If there's something that you're feeling, something going on, I would trust that intuition. Now, also, what would we want to let go of that's related to this sign of Pisces? Again, this is like the sign of dreams. Okay. Sometimes with this Pisces energy, if somebody's got a whole heavy dose of Pisces energy in their natal chart, there can be this tendency that makes it very difficult to concentrate. In fact, I've heard a lot of Pisces say things like, I just don't feel like I belong here. I feel like I can't get around in this, this very material world. Okay. Because it's so unearthly. But here we are having this very earthly experience. Okay. So if maybe that's something that you've kind of lost track of the physical realm and your mundane earthly responsibilities, you might want to set the intention to let some of that go. Also, this sign of Pisces, especially being ruled by Neptune, it's the sign that's most directly and most prominently associated with things like drugs and altered states of consciousness, okay? Especially something that's like a dreamy kind of drug, something, that's say like an opiate or something like that. Now, if you are somebody who is on, some kind of a prescription drug or whatever it is, or even just alcohol, whatever it is, you might want to be really careful in the hours surrounding this transit because that stuff can be very amplified. Not only that, but if you are somebody who say is trying to, get some of that out of your life, maybe you're taking too many substances or whatever it is, you might want to set the intention to let some of that go with this waning moon, when the moon starts to get smaller through the sign of Pisces. Okay, so there's that. Let's go ahead and pull up the chart here and start going through some of these placements. If you are new here, I work with geocentric Western astrology. So with that said, what we're looking at here is basically a snapshot of what we call the tropical zodiac at the time of this full supermoon. So these things right here are the symbols for the planets and the celestial bodies. Okay, like here is Saturn, here is the moon, here's Neptune. When we go in the wheel just a little ways, these things are the symbol for the zodiac signs that all these planets and celestial bodies will be beaming through onto Earth at the time of this full moon. Okay, so let's start with the moon over here. This right here is a symbol for the moon. This right here is a symbol for the sign of Pisces. So we see this moon coming through at 25 degrees, 41 minutes Pisces. Now, just exactly opposite that, we see the sun here at 25 degrees, 41 minutes Virgo. Virgo and Pisces are opposite each other. That's what happens every single time we have a full moon. The sun and moon are exactly opposite each other. That's in part why any full moon, we tend to be a little more sensitive towards each other's energy. We've got the two brightest lights in the sky facing each other. It's in part why full moons are a very intense time. Okay. And by the way, happy solar return season to all you Virgos out there. I do happen to love that energy. Not only that, but the sun's going to be moving out of the sign of Virgo about 5 days after this full moon. And I'm absolutely heartbroken over that because that will technically be the end of summer. So be it. Okay. So back up here to this moon. What's going to happen here is about 4.5 hours after this full moon, the moon she's going to go this direction. She's going to go over Neptune, and the moon is like a distributor. Okay. So when she goes over Neptune, she's distributing more of Neptune's energy. So this is what I'm talking about. This is like hyper spiritual energy that we are all receiving. Okay. Then as time moves by, I think it's around 12:30 that night, or PM Pacific time. AM Pacific time on the 18th, the moon moves into the sign of Aries. Okay. And then later on that afternoon, the moon will transit over this north node. Okay. And that's really what makes this an eclipse. Anytime we have a lunar eclipse, it means the sun and the moon are exactly opposite each other. And it means that the moon is somewhere near either the north or south node, and it means the sun is somewhat near the north or south node. So that's what makes this a north node lunar eclipse, okay? Because the moon is closer to that north node. Now, this north node is what pumps energy into Earth. So we're talking about, we just had this eclipse, the moon's still in a very close to fullest form. So she's distributing things and she goes over that north node, pumping energy into Earth. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. This is an extremely, extremely powerful full moon lunar eclipse, supermoon. lunar eclipse. Now, I will say this personally, I know that well, at least from my understanding, that this eclipse is visible from, I think it's all of North America and I think South America as well. And I think it's going to be at its maximum at 7:44 p.m. Pacific time. Now, with that said, I personally don't recommend going out and observing really any kind of an eclipse. And I know people that do, and they've said, oh, I had no problem with it. But I've also known a lot of people who have actually brought some injuries into their life, brought in some, it's like these eclipses. Here's this north node. So again, the nodes, anytime we have an eclipse of any kind, it means the sun, it's either the sun that's near the north or south node, that's a solar eclipse. But when we have the opposite, the sun and the moon opposite each other and they're near the nodes, that is the lunar eclipse, okay? And these nodes are very powerful. This north node is actually sometimes referred to as the dragon's head. Okay, it's an aggressive energy. I mean, I don't mean to make it sound bad. In fact, the nodes are said to rule over the journey of our soul. They have so much to do, especially the transiting nodes, meaning the nodes up in the sky. They are like what rules over our karma as a collective karma. Okay, and the energy comes in through the north node and out through the south node. Okay, and it's this north node can even be sometimes associated with things like greed or materialism. The south node tends to be more about detachment. The south node tends to be a little bit more of a letting go, and it's also a little bit more of a spiritual energy. But this north node, the dragon's head, is a very, very strong and powerful energy. So with that said, it's like when you're going out there and you're observing an eclipse, you're either being bombarded with the north node energy coming in. And basically what happens right at the time of the eclipse, it's almost like we get a moment of that energy is cut off. Okay. But then right after the eclipse happens, we're getting hit. When it's a north node eclipse, we're getting hit very powerfully with this north node energy. And I happen to love the sign of Aries. The sign of Aries is, it's like the warrior of the zodiac. And that's actually, I want to get into this. So that north node is actually going through the sign of Aries all the way until January of 2025. And so we've all been receiving this heavy dose of Aries energy. Aries is, again, it's the warrior of the zodiac, tends to be a very aggressive energy. Does that mean everybody who's in Aries is aggressive? No, not at all. But the sign of Aries in and of itself, it's the first sign of the zodiac, and it's very, very courageous and powerful energy. So we're all receiving that Aries energy. But this is where I want to go with this next. After it'll be about 2:30 in the afternoon Pacific time on September 18th. The moon will have already gone over Neptune, already gone over that north node, and then the moon goes over Chiron, which is the wounded healer. Okay, Chiron has so much to do with healing, especially our karmic wounds, okay, or wounds that are a lot of times come from our early childhood development. And Chiron's going to the sign of Aries as well. Okay, Aries, again, it's the warrior of the zodiac. So this moon transits over Chiron in the afternoon of the September 18th. Again, if you're in a totally different time zone, you might want to check this stuff out for your time zone. But the moon distributes that healing energy from Chiron through the sign of self, the warrior of the zodiac, the sign of Aries. The first sign of the zodiac is the sign of self. This can be very good for influencing this. I'm ready to heal these wounds, these karmic wounds or wounds from my childhood, myself, like a warrior. Okay. And it's so powerful because we just had this full supermoon lunar eclipse. Okay. So there's that. That's a lot of energy. In fact, I'm just going to say this, the whole day of September 17th, 18th, and even September 19th, I would be, and that could kind of go for any time zone. I would just be taking this all in. I would do the best to stay grounded as possible, meaning going out and put your bare feet touching earth. And also just be very mindful of how much energy we are receiving through this transit. And keep in mind also that we all experience this as a collective, but it's also incredibly unique to each and every one of us. And so much of this depends on your own natal chart. Do you have anything near 25 degrees Pisces? Do you have anything near, say, 6 degrees Aries? Do you have anything near 22 degrees Aries? If so, whatever those are, planets, asteroids, your rising sign, whatever it is, that's an extra dose of this stuff that you are personally receiving. It could be coming through your house of physical health, could be coming through your house of transformation. So that's in part why it's so good to get familiar with our own natal chart. Okay, so let's move on to talk about, let's go to Mercury over here. Mercury is important. So Mercury is going through the sign of Virgo, which I love Mercury in Virgo. I just absolutely, it's like the perfect place for Mercury because Mercury rules Virgo. Not only that, but Mercury's not in retrograde. He's going at a good speed. Mercury was what influences our mental function and our communication skills. Mercury has a massive influence on the nervous system. And the sign of Virgo is really the sign that pays very close attention to detail. Okay, it's like the one that analyzes things. It's a very intellectual energy, but it's also grounded because it's an earth sign. So here we've got Mercury in a very good spot. And what he's doing is he's making a very strong opposition. In fact, that on September 18th, this will be an exact opposition between Saturn over here and Mercury. So Saturn, as I mentioned earlier, is the bringer of discipline and responsibilities. This kind of opposition it's like, here's Mercury helping us all concentrate, but that concentration, that level of concentration can go deep with this opposition to Saturn. Saturn's saying, be disciplined, be responsible about this. And not only that, but Saturn, again, going through the sign of Pisces, Pisces being the sign of mysticism. This is what I'm talking about. People being disciplined with their spiritual practices and really starting to study this stuff. And in so many different ways, people are getting serious with their spiritual practices. But that is this opposition, again, between Mercury and Saturn takes that to a whole nother level. Really powerful stuff. Okay, now let's talk. I'm going to go back to the sun for a minute here because I want to talk about this grand trine that's going on. This right here, again, is a symbol for the sun. Over here, we see this blue line. It's a trine up to Pluto in the sign of Capricorn. These trines create basically harmony, okay? And then over here, we have Uranus in Taurus with another trine going from Pluto to Uranus. Then we've got another trine going from Uranus over to the sun. Now, this grand trine is actually going on. Let's see here. I took a little bit of notes on this. The grand trine between the sun and Pluto and Uranus is going on basically all the way till the 23rd of September. So let's break this down in a general format. Okay, so these are all earth signs. Again, Virgo is an earth sign, Capricorn is an earth sign, and Taurus is an earth sign. So that's great because we could use that earthly energy to keep us all fairly grounded during this kind of transit. But Pluto is the bringer of very powerful transformation and is working with immense strength right now because he's in retrograde. Okay, that's aggressive energy that we're receiving from Pluto, especially at 29 degrees Capricorn. This is the anaretic degree and in retrograde. So extreme powerful transformation, potentially even like having to reevaluate your transformational process with Pluto in retrograde. And then over here, Uranus wants revolutionary changes, abrupt revolutionary changes, okay, and could potentially somehow have to do with anything that involves technology or inventing something along these lines. But these guys are all getting along here. Taurus is basically like the sign of money, material possessions, your value system. Capricorn over here has a lot to do with what we're building in the world. Capricorn is also very strongly associated with things like the government. Okay, so just really powerful stuff going on here with that grand trine. And not only that, but just a few days after this, let's see, it's kind of actually starting just a couple days after this. Mercury is going to move along, and Mercury will then make this grand Earth trine between Pluto and Uranus. And so that's a really, it's basically an opportunity to really flow through a transformational process, or also reevaluate the transformational process. Now, again, on a collective level and as individuals, okay? I do think that this grand trine is having a lot to do with very big changes going on in the world, and Mercury's bringing it into our conscious awareness, especially while Mercury is opposing Saturn. Okay, so that is a lot of energy coming through here. Now, next up, I'm going to talk about happy little Venus over here. So Venus, she's going through the sign of Libra, which that's her own home. Venus rules the sign of Libra, and Libra is very much the sign of justice and fairness and harmony and relationships. And it's basically has a lot to do with you sharing your energy with another person. Okay, can also have a little bit to do with contracts, but Venus works so comfortably here. So we've got Mercury in his own home in the sign of Virgo, and we've got Venus in her own home in the sign of Libra. So that's lovely. But going over here, we see another opposition over to Chiron, the wounded healer, who wants us to heal. So this is, again, very, very strong energy. And if you think about that, again, the afternoon Pacific time, September 18th afternoon for Pacific time, that moon transit over Chiron, beaming out, like, oh my gosh, this is so much healing energy coming through with Chiron going through Aries. But we'll also be making this opposition with Venus. So with that said, this could also potentially involve some kind of a healing energy that's going on between you and your partner of any kind. Doesn't have to be a romantic partner. Could involve a business partner, could involve even a best friend, could even involve Venus, can also have a lot to do with a female in our life, not mother, but say a sister or a daughter or a female best friend, something along those lines. So Venus is also playing a big role in that Chiron, you know, bringing through that healing energy through the sign of Aries. So it's like healing through the self and through potentially a partnership. Okay, now let's briefly talk about the South Node going through the sign of Libra. That is also going on until January of 2025. So this South Node is the drain point that takes energy away. In fact, we will have a South Node solar eclipse coming up here in a couple weeks. Of course, I'll put a video out about that. But this South Node drains energy away. So we do have Venus and the South Node, in my opinion, are not really close enough for them to be intertwining right now or blending together. I guess to a certain degree they are, but that's a pretty big distance between Venus and the South Node. But overall, going back to this sign of Libra, partnerships, justice, fairness, relationships of all kinds, contracts. Libra can also have a lot to do with charm and beauty, but here's this South Node draining some of that out. I've said this so many times. It's such a weird year for an election with this drain point going through the sign of justice and fairness. Okay, so that is kind of a strange one. If you've got anything near 6 degrees Libra, whatever it is, keep in mind there's probably something being drained away from that, especially if you consider what houses is coming through in your natal chart, okay? If it's coming through your house of relationships, there might be something that's being drained out of a relationship in your life. That sort of thing could be going on. Okay, now let's see here. Where do we got to go next? Let's talk about Jupiter. Jupiter here going to the sign of Gemini. So again, Jupiter is one of Pisces rulers. So he's a little bit of a lord of this full moon. And going through the sign of Gemini. Jupiter, again, is about faith, abundance, also have a lot to do with luck, wisdom. Jupiter is the great benefic who expands energy, okay? Can also have a lot to do with wisdom and philosophy. Now, going to the sign of Gemini, this is going on until June of 2025. Gemini is actually the student, okay? The motto for the sign of Gemini is I think, okay? So Jupiter, it might not be his favorite zodiac sign to be in. The reason I say that is because Jupiter actually rules this sign up here, the sign of Sagittarius. Of course, that also rules Pisces, but Jupiter rules the sign of Sagittarius. So opposite that, that's where he's a little debilitated. But regardless, there's some really good things that can come out of this. This is a really good time for, you know, diving deep into your studies. If you could kind of think about it as like the professor, Jupiter, is in the student's house for a little while until June of next year. So, and keep in mind, if you've got anything near 20 degrees Gemini, Jupiter's sitting on that thing, might be bringing in all kinds of abundance for some people. Okay, then we're going to talk about poor old Mars here. So Mars, I mean, he's all right. Mars he's in the sign of Cancer, I think for another 4 weeks or so. So Mars also kind of struggles in the sign of Cancer. And the reason for that is because Mars wants to pierce through things. Mars is the influencer of dominance and aggression. Going back to that sign of Aries, how Aries is the warrior of the zodiac. It's because Aries is ruled by Mars. Okay. Mars wants to penetrate things, wants to pierce things and get into them. And the sign of Cancer is a water sign, just like the sign of Pisces. It's very sensitive. The motto for the sign of Cancer is I feel. Okay, this sign it's almost like a nurturing, motherly kind of energy. When I think of Mars in Cancer, I'm just kind of think of like a mother going to war. It can definitely manifest as being very, very protective kind of energy. If you've got something going on in your natal chart and you're 7 degrees Cancer, there might be something going on where you feel like you have to protect your children or protect a loved one of any kind, protect somebody that, a friend, something like that, because that sign of Cancer is very much about protection. And again, Mars influences, let's go. Okay, now, what is very interesting is this square that's going, okay, so again, here's the north node that pumps energy in. Here's the south node that takes energy out. So here's Mars revved up, ready to pierce through things, but going through this very sensitive sign, but squaring these nodes. Now, keep in mind that these nodes, they rule over our karma, basically. I mean, a lot of things roll over our karma, but I'm talking about the flow of our soul's journey, okay? So that's a good way to explain it. If there's something that you really want to flush out, or say there's something you really want to bring in, Mars is, these squares create a force, and Mars creates a force. So there's this force that's coming through, okay? And it may involve some kind of, might be aggressive, but also in some ways emotional and sensitive, okay? So especially if you've got something near, really between, I'm going to say 5 and let's even go with 8 degrees, something between 5 and 8 degrees, especially in any of the cardinal signs, okay? Aries, Capricorn, Cancer, or Libra. This is a profound time to be pumping things out and bringing something new in, okay? So again, especially has something to do with a little bit of sensitivity with Mars going to the sign of Cancer. Something else I want to point out here is that, so Mars and Saturn, they're considered the malefics, okay? I don't mean to make them sound bad, but it's like Saturn is the ruler of things like chronic disease, okay? But we need Saturn. If we didn't have Saturn, nobody would take care of their responsibilities. But he is the ruler of chronic disease. He constricts, he makes things cold and tight. And then we've got Mars is another malefic who kind of like the ruler of acute disease, okay? Mars is more like an injury or something that comes through that's aggressive. Mars is the ruler of things like inflammation, that sort of thing. So we've got both of the malefics in water signs, okay? So the waters of the body, in fact, even just the waters of Earth, we might want to be very mindful about that. If you're a surfer, you might want to be a little extra careful, but also the waters, the fluids in the body, the lymphatic system. I'm going to go a little bit deeper into the lymphatic system. But all of these things might want to just be a little bit mindful, especially if you've got a lot of water placements in your natal chart, especially if you got Pisces or Cancer energy in your natal chart, or the sign of Scorpio as well, which is another water sign. Okay, so I think I covered everything I wanted to there. So let's get into body parts. Okay, so the sign of Pisces, it rules the feet, okay? And so some people might be having some feet issues. In fact, I know a couple clients as of late who've got some Pisces energy going on. They've been experiencing feet problems, bunions, that sort of thing. Might want to be a little bit careful with your feet. Another thing is, especially for you Pisces out there, Pisces moon, Pisces rising, Pisces sun. Again, Mercury and Pisces can be like this too. I would definitely not at the moment of the eclipse. In fact, I'd give it at least 2 hours before the eclipse to 2 hours after the eclipse. But without that window of time, like before 2 hours before the eclipse, I recommend going outside, putting your feet on the earth, touching earth, especially for you Pisces out there. Getting grounded, getting stabilized. And then also, again, like 2 hours after the eclipse. Might even want to wait a little longer than that. Basically, I would just kind of try to remember to go outside, put your feet on earth, touching earth, because again, Pisces rules the feet. Okay, so we can experience that grounding energy, that earthing energy, just not within a time frame that's very close to the eclipse. Okay, I hope that made sense. But also, Pisces rules the lymphatic system. Okay, and the lymphatic system is very tricky. It's not an easy one to maintain, but the lymphatic system is very, I mean, I've even, as of late, been reading some things about, do we even really have an immune system? I mean, I get it. I get the immune system. It's our body wanting to build up immunity from things. But regardless, we don't technically have like we have a lymphatic system. We have a nervous system, but we don't really have, at least not that I've seen, an actual immune system. But it is said, even going back into ancient times, that well, maybe not ancient times, I'm going to say basically around the time that the lymphatic system was discovered, it's like you can't really treat your immune system or your immunity without taking care of your lymphatic system. And the lymphatic system is difficult to take care of. And it's very much will depend on your own physical makeup, okay? Your constitution. However, just some general things. I'm not a doctor. I'm not trying to offer any kind of medical advice, but some things that have been beneficial for me. I have to be very, very mindful of my lymphatic system because I got a lot of water in my natal chart, a lot of Pisces energy as well. But that is red root can help kind of keep the lymph flowing. Also, I've had really good experiences with golden seal. You can do these things in a tincture, or I was taking golden seal capsules. I think you can actually just get the powder if you want. So those are things that I've had good experiences with for the lymphatic system. Of course, lymphatic exercises, and I've heard everything all over the map as far as lymphatic exercises go. Some people say very slow motion, be very gentle. I would be very gentle. If you got like swollen lymph nodes or something like that, I would not be like rubbing the heck out of those lymph nodes during the days surrounding this transit. I would be very, very gentle with them. Just, gentle touches, maybe tapping, that sort of thing, like tapping on the swollen lymph node very carefully, very gently. But then I've also heard people say getting on a rebounder, which is basically kind of like a smaller version of a trampoline, and jumping a basically movement period is going to be what's beneficial for our lymphatic system. And I do want to throw this out there that if you are somebody who deals with lymph issues, so this book, which I brought up this book a few times, it's called Earth-Wise Herbal Repertory by Matthew Wood. Has a really good, there's stuff in here that I don't even know how to pronounce, but there's a couple pages in here that really kind of give an idea as to how to take care of the lymphatic system. I think a main one was calendula mixed in with some kind of a warming agent or a warming herb can be really good for the lymphatic system. But again, a lot of this depends on your own lymphatic issues. But overall, be mindful with your lymphatic system during this transit. Okay, now also, I wanted to mention seaweed tends to be really good for the sign of Pisces, okay? I happen to love seaweed. I know not everybody loves seaweed. I'm talking about dulse. What I like to do is I like to buy the stuff that you would roll a sushi roll with, that kind of seaweed, but I just roll up an avocado and put a little salt and pepper on it. Sometimes I'll get a little bit fancier than that. But see Pisces, unfortunately, it's the last sign of the zodiac. Out of all the zodiac signs, this is the sign that tends to have like the weakest vitality. Does that mean that everybody who's a Pisces out there is going to have weak vitality? Absolutely not. Because again, there's so much more to the natal chart. But the sign of Pisces, in and of itself, it's the sign that's done with Earth here. It's the sign that's much more tapped into the spiritual realm. And so it doesn't tend to have the strongest constitution. And the thing with seaweed, it is absolutely packed with vitamins and minerals, iodine, which is great for the thyroid. And so seaweed, if you are a Pisces, you might want to consider, again, I totally get it. Some people don't even like the smell of seaweed, which is, I can understand. I personally love it. Okay, so there's that. Let's talk about gemstones. Pisces dedicated zodiacal birthstone is aquamarine, which is a beautiful stone. It's actually like quite dreamy, especially if you get like a super, this is actually a little more sparkly in person than it is showing up on the camera here. But it's almost like the color of the ocean. Neptune is the god of the sea, by the way, I should have mentioned that. And aquamarine is said to keep us safe if we're doing any kind of travels overseas. In fact, last June, I took a cruise for 11 days and I felt a little uneasy about it. I brought my aquamarine with me, or if anytime I'm flying, get in an airplane that's going to fly over the ocean, I always take my aquamarine with me. It's said to keep us safe. But it's also, yes, it's protective, but also it's this very like dreamy stone. Again, if you just kind of look at the color, again, it's not really picking it up on the camera, but it's a very like ethereal energy that we receive from aquamarine. Okay, now, and not only that, but it's pretty darn affordable unless you're getting some super high class, high quality aquamarine, which there's plenty of those out there as well. The next one I'm going to mention here is fluorite, which fluorite usually comes in like the color of the sea, like a blue-green, but it also comes in purple. You can see there's a little bit of purple right here. It also can come in yellow. I think there might even be pink fluorite. I don't know if that's natural or not. Regardless, fluorite is another one that's super dreamy energy, super Piscean kind of energy from fluorite. Also, I have heard that fluorite is supposed to support the lymphatic system as well. Of course, there may not be any scientific proof about this, but this is what I have heard. I've heard of women actually taking a piece of fluorite and sticking it into their brassiere to kind of like influence the lymphatic system to keep in a healthy kind of flow. Okay, I think that's probably something that should be done maybe like with some kind of integrative medicine, meaning I wouldn't just entirely rely on a piece of fluorite for that, but if you're doing all the other things to help support the lymph, it just might be beneficial for you. Okay, now the last one I'm going to mention here, this right here is amethyst, which amethyst is technically Aquarius's birthstone. But the reason it resonates well with the sign of Pisces as well. And the reason I brought it up is because this is another one that can really enhance the being able to foresee using your intuition. The sign of Aquarius is also very intuitive, but in a totally different way than Pisces. The motto is I know, and it's more like picking up on little electromagnetic signals throughout there. I always picture the sign of Aquarius with like antennas coming out, picking up signals. And in fact, it picks up like the electrical stuff versus Pisces is more picking up stuff through the waters of the earth. Okay. But the amethyst here it's like, especially if you're using a combination, enhancing that stuff. Another stone that isn't necessarily a Pisces stone, but can really enhance the intuition is Herkimer. And then also another one I wanted to mention too, I should have grabbed mine. Bloodstone also resonates well with the sign of Pisces, and that one's much more grounding. So let's say you're already somebody who's kind of in daydream land a lot, especially if say you've got Neptune going over your sun or something, and you're really kind of feeling out there. You might want to use something that's a little more grounding, like bloodstone. Again, you can always look in the description below to see what other gemstones resonate well with the sign of Pisces. Okay, so I think I will leave that there. If you would like to schedule an astrology reading, please do visit erinwageastrology.com. I do hope to hear from some of you. And until next time, namaste to all of you.